Hi, folks. Faith is hanging out with me here. She's trying to help me figure out how to hook up my DVD player. I can hook it to the computer, but I would like to hook it to the TV because I want to watch some interesting video on my TV. We'll see. So here we go. We are working on quadrant 3. Now, quadrant 3 does keep looking for the return or the repeated ideas, but it also, we're looking for the repeated ideas to help us find a theme. So we're still with the repeated ideas that we had the last time I left you, but I'm taking one of the repeated ideas, the repeated idea of tries, and I'm writing down the examples. So tries are what Chase's mom calls half-truths. They're when his dad says he's in town because he's just lucky, he guesses, or that he implies he's a doctor by calling it Master's MD. So I want you to take a couple of the repeated ideas that you think might end up being the theme or what the author is trying to tell us. So I think the author might be trying to tell us that we need to be honest, but I'm not completely convinced that that's the theme. So that's why I'm taking notes on this one, and I'll be taking notes on a couple others as well. So as we move into quadrant 3, we have just finished. Chase knew it was just the beginning of what, for some of them, would be the worst night of their lives. Now, I'm really fascinated by this because it's 7:10 p.m., and it's just the second day that he's known Nicole. But at 7:10 p.m., do you think they're still on the bus? And when I asked this before to a group of kids, they said, I know they're still on the bus because look at the cover, it's night. And I said, that's not really fair when you're making predictions, but that was a good clue for the predictions. The wind got stronger and the rain fell harder. When there were just 5 of them left on the bus, Nicole finally joined Chase on the back bench. This is pretty scary. You might have been right about staying at school. We're almost at the farm, aren't we? Nicole started talking very quickly. I can't tell. The driver's been following a crazy route to get around traffic. The girl sitting right behind the driver lives the closest to us. I think her name's Rashawn. She's a new girl. Someone told me her father's the caretaker of the wildlife refuge next to our farm. The caretaker's house is 5 miles farther out. She's usually already on the bus when I get on in the morning. I guess her parents took her to school today. She's probably wishing they had picked her up, too. I'm sorry I called you paranoid. Chase smiled. He didn't smile at Nicole's nervousness, but at something his father had said to his Uncle Bob when his Uncle Bob accused him of being paranoid. I wasn't insulted, Chase said. Paranoia is just another word for heightened awareness. That means that you're really paying close attention. That's funny, Nicole said, relaxing a little. Why are you sitting way back here? Chase pointed at the emergency door. It's safer. So that's also a repeated idea, is being safe, being ready, being prepared. The bus stopped. 2 more people jumped off, leaving Chase, Nicole, and the girl sitting up front. Tell me about the refuge, Chase said as the bus lurched forward. He didn't really care about the refuge, but he felt that if he could keep her talking, it might calm her down. It borders one end of our farm. We actually used to own a good piece of the refuge land, but my grandfather donated it to the state. How big is it? It's huge and getting bigger. The state bought a large parcel of land down the road from us with a levee on it. And so look up levee, L-E-V-E-E, and see what that is. Eventually, they'll buy our place, which will connect the levee property to the refuge. Your dad's going to sell the farm? Eventually, yes. Not anytime soon, but he'll sell it. If the circus goes under, we won't need the land. What's on the refuge? I haven't really spent any time there. If I'm not swimming, I'm taking care of the animals. There isn't much time for exploring. I suppose the refuge has birds, gators, deer, snakes, Florida things. Chase scooted over to the window. All he could see was pitch black through the sheets of rain. No car lights, no street lights, no house lights. He scooted back to Nicole. Maybe we should invite Rashawn to come back here with us. She's probably just as scared as we are. You're scared? Yeah, aren't you? I'll get her. Chase pulled the handheld GPS out of his go bag and fired it up. Nicole returned with Rashawn. She was big, almost as tall as he was. She was sopping wet from sitting close to the door, and she was shivering. He hoped she was shivering because she was cold, not frightened. None of them were dressed for a hurricane. Rashawn sat down on the bench across the aisle from them. Chase took a Mylar first aid blanket out of his bag and handed it to her. "Why are you sitting all the way back here?" Rashawn asked through chattering teeth. "Chase thinks it's safe." "Warmer," Chase interrupted. No use scaring Rashawn any more than she already was. "And drier." "You're the boy who was afraid to get on the bus." "Yeah." Rashawn shook the blanket out and put it around her broad shoulders. "What kind of kid carries a blanket in his backpack?" "A Boy Scout," Nicole answered. "Former Boy Scout," Chase clarified. "That bus driver's lost," Rashawn said. "What makes you think that?" "Been sitting behind him since we left school. He talks to himself. He mutters a lot. Everything was fine until he dumped off those last two kids. He took what he thought was a shortcut." "Do you know where we are?" Rashawn shook her head, splashing water from her wet hair on both of them. "I've only been here a month. I couldn't find my way home from school on a bet. Guess I should have been paying better attention." Chase slid over to the window to get a better angle on the satellites for his GPS. Once the satellite located them, he could punch in where they needed to go and tell the driver. "Maybe we can help him." So this book was written several years ago, and they didn't have cell phones like we have now. They had GPS phones, and so that might be something that you would be interested in researching. 7:20 p.m. Their location popped up on the little screen, but it meant nothing to Chase. As he turned to ask Nicole for her address, a gust of wind lifted the bus completely off its tires. Just as suddenly, the bus slammed back on the road and started to tip. Now that would scare me to death. The wind lifted the bus off and slammed it down, and it started to tip. "On the floor!" Chase shouted above Rashawn and Nicole's screams. He reached out and grabbed an arm. He couldn't tell who it belonged to, and pulled one of the girls to the floor. "Brace yourselves." He wrapped his legs and arms around the steel rods, hoping Nicole and Rashawn had done the same. If they were lucky, the bus would simply land on its side. If they were lucky. But they weren't lucky. The bus rolled 3 times, maybe 4. It was impossible to tell in the dark with the deafening sounds of screeching metal, shattering windows, and terrified screams, including Chase's own. The bus came to a stop, but only long enough for Chase to reach out and grab his GPS. He glanced at the screen and saw a single black line surrounded by blue. The bus started to slide, front end first. "We're going into the water," he shouted, hoping someone was alive to hear him. "Stay on this end of the bus. We'll use the emergency exit." No one responded. They were either too frightened to speak, unconscious, dead, or had tumbled to the front of the bus. The bus hit the water like a torpedo, pushing Chase's face into the seat frame. He felt a front tooth snap, followed by the coppery taste of blood. Frantically, he felt around for his go bag. He'd need the first aid kit and everything else in the bag if they survived the crash. He grabbed a handful of hair. "Ouch!" Chase spit out a mouthful of blood. "Nicole?" "Yeah." "Anything broken?" "I don't think so. You?" "Front tooth. Where's Rashawn?" "I'm next to Nicole," Rashawn said. "My go bag," Chase said. "I have it," Nicole said. "We're sinking." "Give me the bag." Chase pulled a headlamp out of the side pocket, turned it on, and slipped it over his forehead. Nicole looked pale in the bright light. "You and Rashawn go through the emergency door and get to shore. It can't be too far." He pulled a second headlamp out and handed it to her. "What are you going to do?" Nicole asked, putting the headlamp on. "I'm going to check the driver." They looked down the length of the bus. Water was gushing through the cracked windshield. "I'm a better swimmer," Nicole said. "I'm sure you are," Chase said, "but I'm stronger. I'll go with you." "No, you get Rashawn to shore. I'll be right behind you. Go." The water was rising fast. The bus would be completely submerged within minutes. He made his way down the steep, slippery aisle, wondering how he was going to get the driver back up the aisle if the guy was unconscious. The driver was unconscious, slumped over the steering wheel. Chase pulled him up. There was a deep, ugly gash on the man's forehead, oozing blood. Chase shouted at him and then tried to shake him awake. There was no response. After the lightning strike, he and his father had taken first aid classes 3 nights a week for months. By the time they'd finished, they could have become paramedics. He felt the man's neck for a pulse. He didn't feel one, but that didn't mean the driver was dead. Chase's hands were numb with cold. He felt his jagged tooth with his tongue and glanced up the aisle to the rear of the bus. Nicole had the emergency door open and was helping Rashawn through. The water was up to the driver's chest now and rising fast. Chase shouted and gave him another shake. The driver let out a weak moan just as the front end of the bus plunged completely underwater. Chase was washed backward in a rush of water. He managed to get a gulp of air just before he was slammed into one of the seats as the bus slipped sideways and then rolled. As the bus slid further, he pulled his way up to the driver again and grabbed the man's arm. He tried to yank the driver free of the seat, but he wouldn't budge. Seatbelt. Chase wasted several precious seconds trying to find the release. If he didn't get the driver to the surface on his first try, the driver would drown. If he didn't get to the surface himself in about 30 seconds, he would drown. Chase shrugged the pack off his back and unzipped one of the pockets. The bus settled to the bottom with a dull thump. Chase tried to keep the panic down. He couldn't afford to make a mistake. He pulled his knife out of the pocket and sliced the seatbelt in 2 places. The driver rose from the seat like a balloon and came to a stop against the door, blocking the exit. Chase knew he wouldn't make it to the emergency exit in the back of the bus with the driver in tow. That left the windshield. It was cracked in several places. He braced his back against a pole and was about to try to kick the windshield out when something dark and very big swam past outside. Chase couldn't tell what it was, but it frightened him so badly that he nearly sucked in a lungful of water. "Get a hold of yourself. Oxygen deprivation is making you see things." The windshield popped loose with his third kick. So remember, we do those emergency drills where they show you that the windshield will pop out. It's made to do that. On the fourth, it came out of the frame and dropped into the dark water. With his lungs screaming for air, Chase grabbed the driver by his shirt collar and pulled him through the opening. Nicole was waiting for him. As soon as she'd seen the bus sink, she'd dived back into the water, leaving Rashawn to make it to shore on her own. She'd gotten to the bus just as Chase was pulling the driver through the windshield. She grabbed Chase's free arm, wrapped it around her neck, and kicked towards the surface. The second they broke the surface, Chase took a deep breath of air and started choking. Nicole helped him pull the driver's head above water. "Can you swim on your own?" Nicole shouted. Chase could barely hear her above the howling wind. He nodded. Nicole wrapped her arm around the driver. "Follow me, the shore's close." They dragged the driver up on the bank where Rashawn was sitting huddled under the first aid blanket. "We might need that blanket," Chase said. Rashawn took the blanket off and gave it to Nicole. "Is he alive?" "Not at the moment," Chase said, pushing the driver onto his stomach. "What does that mean?" Chase glanced at his watch as he began pushing on the driver's back. It was 7:32. 7:56 p.m. So what Chase meant is, unless they could get his lungs going, unless they could get him breathing, that he wasn't alive. He wasn't breathing. "Are you sure he's dead?" Rashawn asked. Chase nodded. No pulse. Dilated pupils. He had probably been dead before Chase had cut the seatbelt. "I've never seen a dead person," Rashawn said. Chase had, more than he cared to remember. He wished he could have done more for the driver, but there were other priorities now. He didn't have time to think about what he might have been able to do, not now, except for one small detail which he hated to bring up in front of Rashawn because she was already pretty freaked out. "Are there alligators here?" he asked. "That depends where here is," Nicole said. "We're on the levee you were telling me about, part of the refuge." "Then there's gators," Rashawn said, "thousands of them, according to my daddy, although I haven't been down on this part of the refuge." Chase looked at Nicole. "Did you see one underwater?" "No. Did you?" "I think so. Just before I kicked the windshield out. I almost died of fright right there. Thanks for coming back for me. I don't think I would have made it to the top on my own." "Gators aren't nearly as aggressive as people think," Rashawn said. "She's right," Nicole agreed. "You shouldn't mess with them, but they usually aren't a threat. Unless you stumble across a nest of gator eggs," Rashawn added, "then you might have a big problem from the mama." "I only saw it for a second, but something told me it was aggressive. Very aggressive." "Daddy's been dealing with gators forever," Rashawn said. "I suspect the gators are all riding out the storm on the bottom. The bus probably jarred one loose, and it was popping up to get some air." Chase was happy to hear Rashawn's little game lecture. It meant she wasn't nearly as frightened as he thought she was. If they wanted to survive the storm, they could not panic. They had to keep their senses about them. It scared me, Chase said. Heightened awareness? Nicole asked. They would also have to keep their sense of humor. No, Chase said. This time it was real paranoia. So neither of you have been on this road? The road was about 20 feet above them, up the steep bank. The girls shook their heads. We have to find some shelter to ride out the storm, Chase said. It's not too bad right here, Rashawn said. We're protected from the worst of the wind on this side of the levee. For now, Chase said, but Emily's just getting started. The water is rising. It's gone up about a foot since we've been sitting here. He pulled the GPS out and turned it on. It was supposed to be waterproof, but the way their luck was going. The screen lit up and immediately picked up a satellite. Chase breathed a sigh of relief. What about your satellite phone? Nicole asked. His dad would certainly have his sat phone on now. Chase felt his shoulder for the familiar strap. The go bag wasn't there. I left it on the bus, he said. The phone wasn't waterproof anyway, and the bag was drenched. I guess I should dive back down and look for it. We could use some of the other stuff, like the first aid kit. I don't think that's a good idea, Rashawn said. Gators aren't usually aggressive, but who knows what they're like in a hurricane. Chase was really beginning to like Rashawn. You probably wouldn't find it anyway, Nicole said. We have the headlamps and the GPS. The first aid kit would be nice, but... She looked at his face. Your lip is swollen and split. Are you okay? I'm fine. Did you say something before we went down about your front tooth? Yeah, but there's nothing in the first aid kit that's going to fix a tooth. I could use a painkiller, but that's the least of our worries. He handed Nicole the GPS. This is the zoom button. Zoom out and find the nearest house. I'm going to check out the road. Chase climbed up the bank, trying not to berate himself for failing to save the driver and forgetting the go bag. If he had the sat phone and it worked, he'd be calling 911 right now and telling them where they were. 90% of their problem would be over, maybe 75%. It would take the rescue team a while to get to them. The wind was fiercer up on the road. He had to spread his legs as far as they would go and hunch over to keep from being blown back down the bank. He recalculated their chances of getting rescued, even if they had the sat phone. 10%, he thought. He lumbered back to where the bus had gone into the water and discovered the wind had not blown it off the road. A large section of the road was gone, and water was rushing through the gap from the lake on the other side. It could have been the weight of the bus that caused the collapse, but he didn't think so. He walked forward 100 yards and found another section of collapsed road. Not good. We need to get down this road while there's still a road to get down. He hurried to the spot he'd climbed up and slid back down the bank. Nicole and Rashawn were smiling. Did you find out where we are? Right in the middle of the levee road, Nicole said, a little less than 5 miles from the farm gate and 10 miles from Rashawn's. She looked at the driver and her smile faded. He almost got us home. Are there any houses closer? Chase asked. Nicole shook her head. Mine's the closest. 5 miles isn't too bad, Chase said, not mentioning that walking 5 miles in a hurricane was probably like walking 50 miles. I'll bet my daddy's driving around looking for me right now, Rashawn said. He's not driving this way, Chase said. The road's collapsing. The only way to the farm is on foot. The good news is that there aren't any trees on the lake to fall on us, and there isn't much debris flying around. I had a couple of rain ponchos in the go bag, but... Nicole held up the bag. Where? The girls' grins reappeared. I told her not to go, Rashawn said, but she was in the water like a cormorant before I could stop her. What's a cormorant? You don't know much about animals, do you? Rashawn said. It's a bird. It only took one dive, Nicole said. It was right by the driver's seat. What about the gator? Didn't see it. You must have scared it off. Chase took out the sat phone and turned it on. Not surprisingly, it didn't work. Next, he took out some energy bars and handed them out. I'm not hungry, Rashawn said. We can eat when we get to Nicole's. Stick them in your pocket anyway, Chase said. It will be a long time before we get to the farm. If we get to the farm, he thought. They actually taste terrible, but they'll keep you going. We're going to burn a lot of energy in the next several hours. Next, he took out a bottle of water for each of them. I don't think water's going to be a problem, Nicole said, pointing to the sky. The water's falling on the outside of your body, not the inside. We need to keep ourselves hydrated. He took out a waterproof plastic bag with paper towels in it, wiped the sap foam down as best he could, and put it in the plastic bag. And finally, he pulled out 2 rain ponchos and handed one to each of the girls. What are you going to wear? Rashawn said. Not that these are going to do us much good now. I'm soaked through. I'll use your blanket, Chase said. It won't be as stylish as your ponchos, but it'll work fine after I cut a hole for my head to fit through. I know you're wet, but the ponchos will help keep the wind out and your body heat in. You must be some kind of super Boy Scout, Rashawn said. I've never seen a bag of tricks like that. It's a long story, Chase said. What about him? Nicole asked, pointing to the driver. Chase was sorry the man had died, very sorry, but he wanted to leave the driver exactly where he was. It would take a lot of energy that they would need later to move him. We can't take him with us, he said. We can't leave him here, Rashawn said. Tomorrow morning after the storm passes, some old gator will get him. She's right, Nicole said. We'll drag him up to the road, high ground. It's the best we can do. Chase didn't want anything to happen to him either, but he didn't think there was much they could do about it. And he didn't think the road was going to be there tomorrow morning. He took everything he thought he needed out of the pack, along with the satellite phone, and stuffed it in his pockets, glad he had chosen to wear cargo pants that morning. He took a couple of pain pills and washed them down with water, which sent fire through his broken tooth. He cut a hole in the blanket for his head. Then he hung the GPS around his neck by a lanyard. Did you learn that from your dad? Nicole asked. Funny, Chase said. So remember, you need to write down some examples from your repeated ideas that prove your repeated ideas. Think about what the theme is going to be.